this PDF by Giuseppe talked about how to create a good string program. So one of the first points that he mentions is that you should be teaching students and not instruments. So you should be valuing their feedback and opinion on the things that you're teaching them, and trying to take into account how they're responding to how you're teaching them. The text said that older students value the content that you're teaching them more, so the pieces really matter to them. So if you're picking pieces that are all kind of from the same era, maybe you're picking all classical pieces, they might get tired of that and want something else. Or if you're picking pieces that are too easy for them, they might want to be a little bit more challenged. So really listening to how they respond and being aware of how they respond to your choices as their teacher. And it says that younger students value being able to relate to you, so picking maybe a pop song that they like, but also challenging them in different ways, like picking pieces from different eras that'll challenge them, but also being relatable, but not too relatable to the point where it's weird, just relatable enough to the point where they're interested in what you're teaching them. It also talks about a couple things that you can improve as a teacher that'll help your students. It talks about modeling a lot, which is more effective than talking at students. So playing, if they're having trouble with a rhythm, playing that rhythm to them instead of explaining them like, oh, like 2/8 notes equal a quarter note, so you have to hold out this quarter note for 2/8 notes. Instead, just having them play back a rhythm that you play them would be way more effective. And so I can kind of relate to this because even at my level, at the collegiate level, it's way easier to listen to a piece of music that I'm trying to learn and then play it after I hear it, especially Bach. It's so much easier to kind of understand the phrasing once I know what it's supposed to sound like. And even in my lessons, when David plays something for me, and I kind of get more of the idea of what it should sound like. So it really works, I feel like, at any level. Also, touching your students, making sure that their hand position's in the right spot, of course asking them before you touch them, but molding their hands, maybe their bow hand, to show them what a good bow hold's supposed to look like instead of showing them yourself, because they're not very developed, especially fourth or third graders, however young you're starting them. They're not as developed as older, teenagers, in high school. So they're going to need some help with the tactile part of learning the instrument. If you're learning new skills with your students, making sure that you're breaking those down into more manageable chunks. So if you're trying to teach legato, having them go slow, so do one bow stroke at a time, and telling them to do long, full bows. Or if there's a rhythm that's particularly challenging, breaking it down, or an articulation that's challenging, breaking it down into smaller chunks that is capable, they're capable of doing, instead of jumping right into the hard stuff. For whatever skill that you're learning that's more complicated. And you want to make sure that when you do move on to those new, more challenging skills, you make sure their foundation is they have a good solid foundation of technique first before they go on to something more challenging, like any skill, really. Also, he talked about having a sense of humor while you teach, because obviously no one's perfect. So if you make a mistake, being able to laugh it off and not be too controlled by perfectionism. So kind of having an easygoing, laid back attitude about mistakes that you make yourself. Also, choosing repertoire, making sure that it's not too difficult and it's not too easy, because if something's too difficult, then it's not going to sound good, and if your students don't sound good, then it's you're not really doing your job. And if a piece is too easy, then students are going to get bored, especially the more advanced students. So making sure you find a good balance. Also, just in general, to improve your teaching, just making videos or like videotaping yourself teaching, and then assessing, am I speaking loud enough? Did I speak too much? Did I speak too little? Too many ums or okays? How long did it take to tune your orchestra? Is the orchestra in tune? Did you give the right kind of feedback? Did you give positive feedback if they were doing something wrong? Did you give negative feedback if they were doing something right? And do they look motivated to learn? So just keeping all of this in mind and assessing yourself will help you become a better teacher.